Oh hey, welcome to the Triad review. Full disclosure, I didn't purchase these kites with my own money. I was given these kites by Naish to use as a team rider. I wasn't told to make a review, and I wasn't told to do or say anything in this review, so all thoughts and opinions in this review are entirely my own. This isn't a bar review, this is a kite review. I think bar choice and line length is all just super personal and something that I don't want to dive into too much within this video. I'm just going to stick to talking about the Triad, what I think its pros and cons are, and where I think it's going to fit into my quiver. My goal in this review is to run through all the various styles of kiteboarding with the Triad that I can if I get a chance and I get the conditions. Obviously, I'm not going to switch to the Triad for something like freestyle, but I do want to test it out because I have been getting people asking me about that. What Ewan Jaspin has created here is a totally new kite. It's built on a completely new platform. He hasn't taken any of the DNA from the old Triad, and everything has been built from the ground up. The sizes I'm riding in the review are the 11 Triad and the 9 and the 7 Triad. Oh, hey Ruby, you want to help do this? Good work. Boards I'll be riding in this review are the Naish 5.5 Fish, the Naish 4.4 Prone, the Oasis Plank 42-inch, and the Naish Traverse 152 Ewan Jaspin Pro. The bar I'll be using in the review is the Naish Torque 2 ATB 50 with 24-meter lines and my own custom loop setup. I've got my own loop because I just like a bigger loop. I like my arms to be the right distance from my body when I'm riding around and doing tricks, because having something that's ergonomic for your size is going to make you ride a lot better and prevent injury. First thing to go into, and a thing I think a lot of people overlook, is the bag situation. I'm a pretty big fan of this Triad bag actually. It's quite lightweight and really simple. It's got the zip only around this half segment of the bag, which is kind of reducing weight and just making it a bit less complicated. I think this bag is a bag you can travel with pretty easily because it's fairly lightweight. And as an added bonus, the bag is big enough to fit 2 kites in. This is the 9-meter Triad bag, and I have a 7 and a 9 in this one bag. So I really like that. If I'm going on a trip, I can fit 2 kites in one bag, take them both to the beach. And yeah, it's super lightweight, this bag. You've probably seen it before if you've seen the BOXER. The BOXER has the same bag as this. My goal with the foiling part of this Triad review was more so to show you how the Triad would stack up against the BOXER, because I think simply showing you that I can foil on the Triad is a pretty pointless task. You can almost foil on any type of kite, so showing that I can ride on the Triad isn't going to tell you a lot. What I did do was I took the 7 Triad down to the beach with my 5 and 8 BOXER, and I tested them back to back, and I did a very similar thing each time out on the water with all of the kites, so you can get a good idea of how it looks between the different models and sizes. The setup I'm foiling with on the Triad and the BOXERs is the same setup. It's the same bar, the same lines, and the same foil and board. I've got the Naish 4.4 Prone board. I really like this board just because it's a little bit bigger, and when I'm carving hard and I do a bit of a touchdown, the 4.4 Prone is much easier to pop back out of the water. The foil I'm using is the Mark 1 700 that I've chopped a little bit of the tips off. I did try it stock, and for my liking it just had a little bit too much span to roll over how I like. That said, some people might love that feeling. They might like the more glide that a little bit wider span gives. And for the people that are smaller than me, I think you could probably pick up the Mark 1 500 and have an equally good time without needing to modify anything. The rear stabilizer I'm using is one I've created myself. It's a very high aspect, flexy tip stabilizer, and I don't think that feeling's for everyone. If you're someone that likes a kind of a loose skateboard truck feel, you might really like the feeling of a very thin flexy tail, but for other people it basically just feels unstable. The mast I'm using is the 75cm Naish carbon mast, and I like to use this mast because, again, I can use it surf foiling and I can use it kiting, and I know how it feels. I know how high to ride out of the water. I can get used to carving and turning, and switching between foil surfing and kite surfing isn't that big of a thing when I'm using all the same gear except for the front wing. My bar setup, once again, is the Naish Torque 2 50cm bar. This time I have about 11 m lines. They're just old lines that I snapped and cut down to the length I like. I really do like shorter lines for foiling. Anything under about 13 meters feels pretty good for the style of foiling that I do. What I like to do foiling is more just free riding and carving really hard. I like to push the foil kind of to its max and just feel like I'm on the edge of blowing up. That's basically what I like to do foiling. Obviously this isn't a perfect test, the wind's fluctuating quite a bit while I'm out there, and also my riding's changing just as I'm getting tired or as I'm getting used to different equipment. When I went out on the 7 meter at first, the wind was quite good actually for a 7 meter. I had probably the best power out of all the kites. Like, I felt like it was in its zone where it's gonna work well. When I went out on the 5 meter, the wind actually dropped off quite a lot, which was unfortunate because I would have liked to have shown the 5 meter in a bit better wind. But you can see in the footage that there's just not enough wind in the canopy of the 5. When I'm drifting downwind, the kite is backstalling and I'm coming off the foil. I just don't have the power there to continue to link together turns. When I went out on the 8 meter, however, the wind picked up and it was actually windier than when I was on the 7 meter. So in that footage, you can see the kite kind of falling from the sky, and that's not because there's not enough wind, and that's not because I'm turning too hard downwind, but it's because I have the BOXER set a little bit too depowered, and when I'm carving off the wind, I already have the BOXER sitting too far forward in the window, so it's dropping down and regaining. Ultimately, the difference between the Triad and the BOXER is one of weight. I didn't go into this test thinking the Triad would be better than the BOXER, and quite frankly, it isn't. Weight is king. The BOXER being super lightweight just makes it really nimble on the water. It follows more accurately your every move. You can see it when I'm carving downwind on my backside, on the 8 meter BOXER especially. It's just, I'm carving smooth and the kite's just flying downwind with me. Likewise, when I'm unhooked on the BOXER and I'm carving downwind on my forehand, the BOXER just follows what I'm doing, and I can do really aggressive turns, much harder than I could on the Triad, and regain the kite without too much of a power punch as it catches the wind again. That's basically the difference of these two kites. The Triad, with its heavier weight, tends to fall more forward with that weight, and when it falls and when it catches the wind again, it has more momentum and more weight on the end of the lines when it catches the wind, and it will be a bigger burst of power every time it catches. That all said, the Triad 7 meter did impress me quite a lot. I actually preferred the feeling of it unhooked on the foil over the BOXER because I think it does fly better unhooked than the BOXER does. The BOXER, with its more pivotal turning, has a little bit more of a stall in the upstroke if you're unhooked, whereas the Triad seems to fly pretty neutral unhooked, and it doesn't really matter if you're turning it up or turning it down, it kind of flies the same. That said, the BOXER, with that more pivotal turning, is a much more nimble kite. You can see it when I'm flying the kite around on the beach, you can see it when I'm doing a loop to turn around. You can see how the BOXER really just pivots around on itself rather than having that more arcing style turn that the Triad has. Would I recommend the Triad over the BOXER if your primary discipline is foiling? Probably not. I do think the BOXER, with its lightweight, is the superior foil kite. That said, if you did choose the Triad over the BOXER, you do have a more versatile kite. The Triad's definitely better for wave and freeride than the BOXER is, so choosing those smaller sizes for foiling would give you some better flexibility if you were to do some other stuff in the future. My setup for foiling is the 5 meter and the 8 meter BOXER. I did used to fly the 4, the 7 and the 9, but I felt as though switching to the 5 and the 8 just simplifies things a lot because I rarely need something smaller than the 5 meter, and if I do, I'm probably just not going to go foiling. Look, I'm going to be honest, I strongly considered not doing this part of the review, not because I don't think you can do freestyle on the Triad, but just because after 20 plus years of kiteboarding, I know for certain that a bridle kite like the Triad is not going to outperform a kite, a 5-line kite like the Torch, or Vegas, or Razor, or Amp, or any of these 5-line types of kite on the market. That said, however, I was getting quite a few requests from people to try the Triad for freestyle and let them know what I think. So I took the Triad down to the spot on a fairly consistent day. I was on an 11 meter. It was pretty windy, I was pretty powered, but I felt like it was a good amount of wind and I was in control. You have to know that this was my first freestyle session back on the water after 8 months. I did hurt my shoulder a bit last season, the end of the Brazil trip that I did, and I haven't ridden freestyle since then. So I did feel quite rusty, but you can also see that I landed pretty much all the kind of go-to tricks that I can do straight off the bat. What you see in the vid is basically what I did on the water. And I even came in with my hair dry at the end of it. The biggest issue for me with a kite like the Triad for freestyle is that I don't feel overly confident trying new tricks on a kite like the Triad. And that's because it doesn't feel so consistent. You can see on the first 313 I tried where the kite just got sent backwards. That wasn't really because I was doing much different than usual turning the kite back, but just because that more line tension that you get from having a bridle kite, I wasn't prepared for, and I needed to adjust how to do a 313 considerably. I needed to pull down a lot harder on my front hand than I would on a sea kite. A sea kite just likes to level out and sit there, whilst the bridle kite likes to kind of stall backwards and turn upwards. So if you're riding a kite like the Triad for freestyle, you do need to adjust from how you would ride with a sea kite, and I don't think that adjustment is a positive one. I just think that you need to change how you're riding and make it work better for a kite like the Triad. I didn't feel overly confident to do anything bigger or anything more than I did. I did think about at the end trying to do a KGB, but my pop off the water and the way I was going into the air and how I felt in the air, I couldn't really feel how high I was going. Like I wasn't confident in how high I would go, how far I would fly, how much slack I would get or anything like that. So for me, it's just not a platform for progressive freestyle. That said, I still think it's a really great kite if it's the only kite you've got. Use what you've got. If you're mostly a wave rider, a foiler, a free rider, and you want to do the odd freestyle, sure, bang it out on the Triad. It's perfectly capable of doing that.
Guess who's the new back character in town? Causing mischief in the city, spinning shit around. I smack a nigga with a brick, talking out of face like I was sniffing paint, face, flying up out of space. I look the best of a metamorphosis. I be slaving in my dungeon while I'm beating surface.
So bitch, wait.
I'm watching porns with Rome's. We analyze the astro black shit. Madden got the graphic kit, so we get that. We commence the astro traveling, grabbing up skin, so we can play a game of javelin. I'm labeled as a bad character, no matter what I do. I'm labeled as a bad character. I'm labeled as a bad character, no matter what I do. I'm labeled as a bad character. I'm labeled as a bad character. Bad. I'm always looking under some girl's dress with a vest. Club ducks wanna put me to rest. Now I'm a soldier in the town drinking butterflies apple. I'm walking around the street passing out boys and apples. Now it's time to skip time. Hey yo, the dirty niggas know how I get down. I stab a nigga in the chest with a pitchfork from behind the robs rich folk, but make up my ancestors these swine. Y'all niggas coming slower than guns while I'm on the run, the director. I'm labeled as a bad character. Yo, I'm labeled as a bad character. No matter what I do, I'm labeled as a bad character.
The Wakeskate part of the review was probably the thing that I was most curious about. I know it's probably the least interesting for anyone else since the least people wakeskate, but for me, I hadn't tried the Triad on the Wakeskate before. I had used the prototypes in Maui wave riding, but I'd never tried the Triad on a Wakeskate. And I was curious about it because although the Torch is by far the best kite unhooked, the Torch doesn't really have a lot of range that I can use on the Wakeskate. And often when I'm riding, especially the bigger sizes of the Torch with a Wakeskate, I'm feeling kind of overpowered and like I don't have enough D-power throw to properly tune my speed and to properly feel in control before I'm throwing tricks unhooked on the skate. The Triad was a great surprise. Initially, just looking at the kite, it doesn't look to me like it would be a very good kite unhooked. It's got that very swept kind of delta leading edge and shape, and that usually means that you just don't have very good feedback at the bar, and the kite wants to do kind of weird stalling things when you unhooked and won't drift too well. But surprisingly, the Triad is really quite fine unhooked. It doesn't have the feedback of the Torch, no, but it is easy to unhook with, and it does tend to drift downwind pretty well with the skate, or at least good enough that it's not like holding back my tricks so much. The biggest bonus for me about riding the Triad with the skate is that it just has a really big power range. That swept leading edge, that kind of delted out shape, that really gives you a lot of ability to sheet out and tilt the kite so you can dump a lot of wind. And when you're riding a Wakeskate, this is a great thing because you really need to ride a Wakeskate powered up. With the skate that I'm riding now, I need to take a size or even 2 sizes bigger than I would normally ride on a twin tip or a surfboard, and having that D-power range there is massive for me. I really got to practice a lot of things like more flip tricks that I hadn't been practicing so much because I just don't like falling off over and over and over again. It gets really tiring. I was able to practice those a lot more on the Triad because I just wasn't using as much energy to ride a Wakeskate on the Triad. So overall, if you're interested in the Triad for a Wakeskate or anything unhooked, maybe you're riding a skimboard, you're riding unstrapped on a surfboard, I really do think that D-power range and the feeling and the drift of a Triad is really going to be beneficial for you. Now we get to the last part of the review, and the thing that I'm sure a lot of you came here interested about, which is wave riding. And I guess the most common question I get from people is, so how does it stack up against the Old TRIAD? And the truth is, these two kites are completely different kites. What Ewan Jaspin has created here is a totally new kite. It's built on a completely new platform. He hasn't taken any of the DNA from the Old TRIAD, and everything has been built from the ground up. What does that mean? That means he's got to work on a kite that has just a completely different feel to what the old kite had. The Old TRIAD to me was a better, maybe intermediate beginner kite. It was quite easy to ride, but it also kind of lacked that softer feel with a greater kind of D-power throw and range that this new TRIAD has. And although it was great for beginner or intermediate kite as the Old TRIAD, it wasn't, in my opinion, a particularly great wave riding kite. I like a kite that has a lot more smooth feeling on the D-power and just a lot softer feel overall. That said, I don't think that the new TRIAD is a really, really soft wave kite. It doesn't feel like something like the Rio that's a very soft kite, and I don't think it's the same as a drifter neither. It's something in between, and that's great for me because I don't want to necessarily ride a huge kite just because the kite isn't powerful enough. I like to be able to ride the TRIAD in those smaller sizes and still feel like I have enough power to do what I want on the water. And the TRIAD is great for that. It has that slightly lower aspect ratio and bigger leading edge, which gives you a lot broader wind range when combined with that kind of delta curved shape that lets you dump a lot of the power when you're sheeting in and out. One of the most noticeable things for me riding the new TRIAD is just how smooth that D-power range is. It has a really kind of long throw when you're sheeting in and out where the kite still feels like it's controllable. Some kites, you sheet out maybe 6, 8, 10 inches, and that's kind of the full range of D-power you have. But with the TRIAD, you can really use like the entire throw that you have on the D-power line to tune exactly the amount of power you want at the kite. And what this does, in my opinion, is just make your riding smoother because you're more accurately able to decide where the right amount of power is for you, and you're not going past that and depowering too much, and you're not pulling in too much and getting too much power. You can really tune that throw and find exactly the right feel when you're bottom turning, when you're top turning and dumping the power. And to me, that's just the biggest benefit of a kite like the TRIAD and why I really like to wave ride on a kite like the TRIAD. Now for unhooked wave riding, I know this is a pretty niche thing, like there's probably only a couple people out there that do it, but for unhooked wave riding, the TRIAD drifts super well unhooked. It's very surprising to me because looking at the kite, just looking at its shape, looking at the bridles, like I've already said, it just looks like it wouldn't ride very well unhooked. It looks like it wouldn't have very good feedback. And it looks to me like it just wouldn't drift that well either. But I think those squarer wingtips and just the way the profile's been made really does let it drift downwind quite easily. And I had no problems riding on a wave unhooked with the TRIAD. And I think that I will continue to choose the TRIAD for unhooked wave riding over a kite like the Torch. The TRIAD for me is just a pleasant surprise. I haven't ridden a kite like the TRIAD in quite some time, and I can't really think of another kite that is exactly the same as the TRIAD. It does take some of the attributes of existing wave kites like the Rio or the Drifter with those squarer wingtip shapes, but it's not really like either of those two kites either, in that it's not such a soft or such a unpowerful feeling kite. It still has some pop and some punch there when you need it, when you want to sheet in, and it's still got really great low end. I could ride the 11 in surprisingly light wind, lighter wind than I feel like I could ride the Torch 12 with a Wakeskate in. So for me, it was really cool to just have such a big amount of D-power and such a big range that I felt comfortable riding the Triad in. And that was the same on a surfboard when I'm wave riding. I just felt like I had a very big range of D-power on the kite, and just the range for each size in general was quite large. The 7 and the 9 did kind of overlap a bit, to be honest. Like I could still be riding the 9 when it was possible to ride a 7. And that's something that I often don't feel on other kites. You especially wouldn't feel that on a 5-line sea kite, for example. And just having that ability to take a kite and for it to be the right size kite without worrying too much if you're going to be on exactly the right size, to not be overpowered on the wave, is really kind of liberating feeling, because it means you're just going to have more fun on the water more often. And I think that's what wave riding is all about. Alright, so that's it for my Triad review, or expose as you will. I've done my best to go over all the different facets I think are relevant for me with the Triad, but if you have any other questions about things that I didn't go over, feel free to hit me up in the comments and I can help you out with that. I hope everyone gets out there, they test some gear, they find what they like on the water and they stick to it and get used to it, because ultimately that's what it's all about. If you want to get good at kiteboarding, you really need to find what you like and then just keep riding that gear. I hope you get some good conditions out there and see you on the water. Peace.